Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Saturday, October 30th, 2021, and I'm joined by not one, but two Couch GMs. That's right, everybody. I got Cody Roadcap with me and Tyler Snyder. Tyler, we missed you. What is up?
Hey guys, so as our avid listeners know, we record our podcast every Monday and Thursday, and you're talking to a guy who works second shift every Monday and Thursday. So if you're wondering why I haven't been here, that's why. But luckily the guys were nice enough to push off recording this week till Friday, just so I could be a part of the recording once again.
And we're hoping to have you around a little bit more in the coming weeks. We can talk about that a little bit later, though, near the end of the show. People want to know what we're talking about today, so we can talk about some NFL news and notes, and we're going to give you a complete Week 8 fantasy preview. This time, because we waited, complete with final injury reports, so we'll be able to give you even more insight than we usually do. You can also find us on thecouchgms.com and on our social media channels, where we'll keep you updated with any interesting news and give you even more insight than you'll give you on this show. But now, with no further ado, why don't we jump into some NFL news? So I think we should start NFL news off with some trades because, as we said on our Tuesday show, the trade deadline is next Tuesday. And we got a running back going back home. Mark Ingram was traded from the Texans to the New Orleans Saints. He moves back to New Orleans, and I don't know if this really has too much fantasy value unless Alvin Kamara were to go down. But what do you guys think about Mark Ingram coming back to a better situation in New Orleans?
Well, I mean, Latavius Murray still had value even when Kamara was healthy, so there's a chance that Mark Ingram really does still get some carries and get some, especially some goal line work, being the big guy that he is. He might steal some fantasy points from Kamara. I don't think he's worth an ad unless you're super thin at running back, but I think it could end up hurting Kamara's value a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. I think it might hurt Alvin Kamara a little bit. I do know Sean Payton was excited to get him back. They asked if he'll play this week. He said absolutely. So yeah, he could be added in. If it was last week with Bipocalypse, you would definitely feel like, hey, he's a guy that you might be able to get a touchdown out of, something like that. He's pretty much like all the Ravens running backs. They're not a little old on the older side, probably not going to put up a lot of yardage, but you're hoping for a touchdown. And it was pretty cool that the Houston Texans really liked having Mark Ingram, and they said that the only team that they would listen to a trade offer from was New Orleans because they knew how much New Orleans meant to Mark, and they were able to facilitate that. So we rag on the Houston Texans a lot, but it was pretty cool to see them be like a high-class organization for once.
This obviously also changes the Texans' backfield situation, but why don't we save that one for when we break down the Texans' game in our preview and move on to another, at least attempted trade here. We got the Rams and Desean Jackson have mutually agreed to find a trade. Jackson had a couple of good weeks back in the beginning parts of the season when they talked about wanting to get him more involved, and then he's kind of fizzled right back out. We know Desean Jackson's never really been the, fantasy receiver you want to trust, but he's a big play guy. What are some favorite landing spots you might think for Desean Jackson for the rest of the season?
Well, I can tell you that wherever he goes, I don't think that he's honestly going to be a guy you really want to rely on in fantasy. Doesn't matter what team he goes to. I'm cool with Cody hitting some landing spots, but real quick, does Desean Jackson just think he's going to go somewhere and become a number one receiver again and get the high volume he used to have when he was with Philly the first time? I don't understand why every time he goes with new team, he thinks, this isn't good enough and I got to go somewhere else. He's past his prime. He doesn't have the speed he used to have, and he's kind of a one-trick pony. I mean, I don't think Deshaun's ever going to find the volume that he expects to be getting.
Yeah, I do think there's some little bit of, he still values himself as a top receiver. Other teams have younger guys stepping up. I mean, Van Jefferson is the reason that they're mutually agreeing to make a trade happen here before the deadline or seek out a trade. But some potential landing spots, a couple that come to the top of my mind. Maybe he'll stay in LA and flip over to the Chargers. He'd move to the AFC, but they would give the Chargers a true number 3 wide receiver, a big play guy. It wouldn't affect Mike Williams or Keenan Allen too much, but just a guy that can come in, take a couple deep threats. I still think he'd be an upgrade over a guy like Jalen Guyton at this point. So I like that matchup. I think when you talk trades and wide receivers, you're always going to talk about the Chiefs. Their defense is struggling, but they seem to always want to, add offensive weapons. put Tyreek Hill and Desean Jackson on the field at the same time, that's still a ton of speed, even though Desean Jackson is
And
up
Mecole
there.
Hardman.
And Mecole Hardman, I'd be a fool on track meet. So those are some of the names I thought off the top. It probably won't be either of them. New England makes a ton of sense because they're receiver and they're always in trade discussions. But like Snyder and George mentioned, this doesn't seem like a trade that's going to impact you fantasy wise. And he's more of going to go. He's probably going to want to go to a team that can win and he can make a little bit more of an impact. But it's not a guy that, again, that you're running out to grab on waivers.
Definitely agree with that. And I think with that, we can move on then to some injuries because we always like to talk injuries in NFL news.
We don't
not
like to
related
talk injuries.
to Thursday
We just
Night
have
Football.
to.
No, I was being sarcastic if anyone didn't catch that.
Well, it didn't really come off sarcastic, so I had to clarify.
Okay, good.
No offense.
I'll work on it. I got it. We just start with the Cardinals. We're going to talk Thursday Night Football in general, but we'll start with the Cardinals and J.J. Watt before Thursday Night Football. It appears that he will miss the rest of the season as he tore up pretty much, I think, everything in his shoulder. I heard something about a pec. He had something in his shoulder and a bicep. They're saying he might be back if the team makes the Super Bowl. I still don't think that's enough time to recover from all that, but J.J. Watt being down, this has been one of the more dominant defenses. Is there anything that makes you worried, especially after seeing Thursday Night Football and the Packers, who were totally depleted, still put up 24 on them?
Nope. No, I still think the Cardinals have a good defense. I don't think J.J. Watt was making the kind of impact that really just held the whole defense together. They still have so many defensive playmakers that they'll be fine. And honestly, I know the Packers were missing a lot of weapons. I get that. But Aaron Rodgers has proved his entire career that it doesn't really matter what weapons he has. He's going to put up offense, especially when you still have great backs like A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. Both of them look great in this Thursday night matchup. The Packers are one of the best teams in the entire NFL, not just the NFC, one of the best teams in the NFL. Looks like week one was a fluke, and anytime you're going up against an offensive powerhouse and one of the top teams like that, there's no shame in losing, especially a close game like that. I wouldn't be worried at all if I was the Cardinals. They'll still make the playoffs, and they'll still be a hot team.
Yeah, I will say, I do think J.J. Watt, although he's not the pass rusher that he once was, he looked better than he has the last few years in Houston, out in Arizona, probably because there was more pieces around him. And he had also been really solid against the run, not something that's as flashy or eats up the stats. But you saw the run was already the weakest point of the Cardinals defense, and it seemed to get a little bit worse yesterday. Going into that game, you would expect them to only focus on the run when you have guys like Equanimeous St. Brown and Juwan Winfrey out there on your starting boundary wide receivers. And yet the Packers were still able to put up almost 5 yards a carry between both backs. So I think J.J. Watt missing hurts them from a defense in the run game, but I agree with Snyder. I think with Chandler Jones still there, he's still their best pass rusher. They still have solid young corners. They have a lot of speed on defense. I think overall they'll still be a solid team and a team that the Packers and the rest of the NFC will still have to look out for the rest of the season.
All right, so slight bump to running backs against the Cardinals. We can keep an eye on that as we approach closer to the fantasy playoffs. But more on Thursday Night Football, it seemed like it was just brutal for injuries. We had Robert Tonyan go down with what appeared to be a knee injury that was severe. We found out he's done for the season. I know we also had DeAndre Hopkins coming in and out of the game with his hamstring injury. What kind of impact let's start with Tonyan. What kind of impact does Tonyan have on maybe any other Packers weapons? Or I know we weren't using him much in fantasy, but it seemed like he was having a bit of a good game there before he went down.
Yeah, it's a tough loss for the Packers to lose Robert Tonyan. He had really started to come on over the last few weeks, started doing more pass routes instead of having to chip defensive ends while they were dealing with offensive line injuries. So this is definitely a heartbreaking loss. Honestly, there's not really a tight end currently on the roster that I think, you like starting in replace of Tonyan. I think some weeks Aguilar will get some good reps. Mercedes Lewis, he'll catch a touchdown here and there. But I don't think the Packers have a consistent tight end moving forward for fantasy-wise. So that just takes a guy off the dartboard. Unless they go out. I know there's a lot of Packers Twitter, not saying it's from the team, but there's a lot of Packers Twitter that's trying to go get Evan Ingram from the Giants, get him a new change of with with DeGuara, Daphne, and Mercedes Lewis there's not really a true replacement, I think, fantasy-wise for the Green Bay Packers.
I mean, honestly,
Got you
tight
there.
ends in whole have just been kind of a grab bag. It's not a let me pick up Tunyon's backup. It's let me just pick up whoever's best on free agency. Because if you don't have one of the top guys, or if you don't have someone who has that potential to put up big points, you're kind of just hoping anytime you pick somebody up. And Tunyon was honestly becoming one of those guys too, where he wasn't consistent, but you put him in because you hope that Rodgers likes him this week and gives him a touchdown or two.
Definitely. And Tyler, I'll let you start hitting on DeAndre Hopkins, how you've seen he's just been mediocre even this year because he's dealing with this hamstring injury. And I heard that the coaching staff was actually mad at him for trying to run back on the field and run some plays in that game last night. So what do you think the long-term effects are on Hopkins? And you think this maybe like mini bye will actually help him when it comes back into week 9?
See, I think with DeAndre Hopkins, I think he'll be fine around playoff time for fantasy. But over the next few weeks, I mean, hamstring injuries are one of the most frustrating injuries in the NFL because every time you think you're over it, every time you think you're back to 100% and you can run, it comes back. The hamstring injuries like to linger. They like to become a nuisance for the entire season. He might even end up having to rest a week or two coming up if this injury doesn't go away, or he's going to cause a bigger issue. Right now, it's trending towards he wants to play next week. And right now, DeAndre Hopkins still has that name value that he is a top player in the NFL. If it was up to me, I think I would be trying to trade DeAndre Hopkins high while I can. Again, you might be losing a big playoff asset, but the pieces you can get back for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, you should be able to supplement that, and this will eliminate that nagging injury that you'll have the next few weeks, where even if he does play, he might not be putting up numbers you like.
Hear that, Cody? Trade me DeAndre Hopkins. I'm telling you.
Make a better offer, but we don't need to break that down on the show. Before we move on to the Week 8 preview, I do just want to give a shout out to the Packers head coach. Matt LaFleur has now become, in this first 40 games, has become the winningest head coach with 33-7 record. So pretty impressive start in your first 40 games. A lot of us, including myself, had doubts when he was hired, and he's really turned it around and set a good culture there in Green Bay. So just a quick shout out for him. But like I said, we got a lot of games to get to, so let's get into our Week 8 preview.
I guess I can start us off, guys. We got the Bengals and the Jets. Look, the Bengals are the better team. The Bengals are the team that people are going to pick in their survivor pools this week. The Bengals have assets. They got Joe Mixon. They got 3 good wide receivers. They got Joe Burrow. But now here's the thing that makes this game interesting. The Jets are actually one of the worst teams against the pass. One of the worst teams to play against. So they're one of the best teams against the pass, I guess is a better way to phrase it. They are the number 2 team against the pass. Is it because they get blown out so early so teams abandon the pass and just go with the run game? Maybe. Either way, it's something to look into. You might want to actually tread lightly if you're starting Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, any of these guys. You might want to watch out because the Jets really do not allow a lot of points through the air.
I'm with you. I mean, I think that Jamar Chase is almost matchup proof at this point. He'd be the guy that I'd be the most confident throwing out there. But I'm going to throw an interesting one out to you then, because this game could become a blowout. And we talked about earlier in the week how Samaje Perine gathered almost as many carries as Joe Mixon last week when it became a blowout against the Ravens. Would you rather start the Boyd or Higgins, or would you rather start Perine in your flex? I'll go bold.
If it was me personally, I can't trust Perine. I know that he has put up points. I know that he has proven himself a little bit over the past couple of weeks, but in my opinion, I still don't trust him. I still like going with the talent, going with the ceiling, and I like Higgins and Boyd better than Perine. If it was up to me in my flex, I'd throw either one of them out there. And if you're talking about which one's better out of those two, I mean, it's a dart throw. I do have Higgins and Boyd in one league. I have both, and every week I got to try to decide, do I start both? Do I just start one? And it is painful, and I'm 1-6 in that league. So
he's not hitting
tough.
too often.
whoever I pick is wrong. And if I start them both, they're both wrong. If I don't start either of them, they both killed it. It's really frustrating. But yeah, I think I'd go Boyd or Higgins over P. Ryan.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, but I do think if you're super desperate, you just want to throw out P. Ryan, it's not a terrible move, especially with Chris Evans out. He is clearly the second running back up. I think Joe Mixon is a smash play this week, but we can pivot over to the Jets side. They're getting a new quarterback, Mike White. I think that's his name. Because Mike White, yeah, I almost botched his last name. And it's super. I know, that's why I was a little confused on, am I even saying this right? But yeah, Mike White is starting the game. Tevin Coleman is out, so it should be a clear game for Michael Carter Jr., whether you want to play it, because the Bengals are a decent defense against the rush. Corey Davis is doubtful, so I guess maybe Jamison Crowder. I mean, honestly, there's not too many Jets I'm willing to throw out there. How about you guys?
No, I mean, if you're in a pinch, Michael Carter is probably your best Jets play. I have him in a league and had to start him last week, and it wasn't pretty. But every week, Michael Carter has that potential for getting a garbage touchdown or getting a few points for you. I think he's really touchdown reliant, and we've seen these kinds of guys in the past where it's like they're only going to get you 5 or 6 points a week usually because the team's so bad and abandons the run, but he does have that potential for a touchdown every week. If they get in the red zone, he's the guy they are going to want to go to. But do we honestly think the Jets are going to be scoring that many touchdowns with Mike White as their quarterback? So to me, if you have other options, I would avoid Michael Carter.
I'd feel more confident if they were throwing Flacco out there on a short week when he just came to the team, and that's sad.
That is sad. You know what else is sad? That somehow this team that's 5-2, looking so dominant, somehow lost to the Jets. And now I know there was a ton of receivers hurt that game, but the Tennessee Titans, they're looking fantastic, coming off 2 big wins against the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to their arch nemesis, the Indianapolis Colts. Tyler, I got to ask you, not even out about fantasy. Do those 2 wins mean anything if you can't beat the Colts this week?
Yes. Yes, it does. Because, look, at this point, the Titans are looking really good for the playoffs. And even if we don't beat the Colts, it's a divisional team. We've seen divisional games go crazy before. Even if we can't, we at least have proven that we can beat some of the big playoff teams. I mean, Kansas City, yes, they're not looking great right now. But odds are we're still going to end up seeing them in the playoffs. Somehow, some way, they're still going to make it. The Bills, in my opinion, are going to win the Super Bowl. If I had to pick a team right now, that's the team I would put my money on. And the Titans were able to beat them and hang strong with them. So, yeah, I think it still does mean something. But, guys, I mean, talk me off a ledge here. Yes, we lost to the Jets. And yes, the Titans are going to be missing Julio Jones this week. So if you have Julio, keep him on the bench. He has been very frustrating this year, but I'm still excited to have him. He'll be fun later on. They are getting some other big pieces back, including Taylor Lewan, helping shore up that offensive line. But after beating the Bills and the Chiefs, after beating the Colts earlier in the year, the Colts are favored to win this matchup. If you go on DraftKings right now, the Colts are the favored team. What's happening here? What am I missing?
Every once in a while, I feel like you see those smoke screens.
Tell you in a sec.
I'll talk while you try to look. I feel like every once in a while you see those smoke screens, and it's normally when you see those games that make you scratch your head and say, I wonder why that's that way. It's, for whatever reason, they guess an upset. Like, they guess that the Colts are going to win, and they're right. Like, I don't know what it is. I've noticed that happens occasionally, and it's like, I don't think that makes any sense. It's got to be the Titans in this game, and the Colts come out and win. So
my guess, it's like
that
1.5.
concerns me on your end.
2.5. It is a 2.5.
2.5.
Interesting. That's a little bit higher than I thought. I do know the home team traditionally on how odd makers, they get a 3-point favorite. So it seems like the odd makers do like the Titans a little bit to back them off that 3 points. But still, coming off 2 big wins, it's impressive. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Colts have looked a lot better. Carson Wentz is starting to look like the Carson Wentz that everyone thought was going to lead Philadelphia to a Super Bowl. He's come a long way since those double ankle injuries in week 2, I believe it was. He's getting back on track. It's a divisional matchup, like you said, so they're traditionally always close. But I still think I would have the Titans favored in this matchup. And Julio hasn't barely played, so it's not like him being out is like a huge odds-making swing. Like, if this was Julio and A.J. Brown out like we saw against the Jets, then I would be concerned. But A.J. Brown's still there. You have Derrick Henry, and I know I'll often bring this up, and I feel like Tyler thinks I'm taking it as a jab, but there was a stat, it was before last night's game, or Thursday's game, I should say. Derrick Henry has 102 more attempts than Aaron Jones. And that's not a knock on Derrick Henry or a knock on Aaron Jones, but it's just crazy on how much he's being utilized and how successful he's been. I think he has like a 400-yard, almost 400 yards lead on the rushing title, and we're only
over
in week
300
8.
yards on number 2. Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy how dominant he has been. Derrick Henry is rolling. I know they're missing Blasingame this week, so I don't know if that can impact the rushing attack too much. I know that's the fullback that's the forgotten man a lot. But
as the resident Titans fan who knows a little bit, we have actually been missing Blasingame a few other games this year. We do have a backup fullback who has slotted in. He even played alongside Blasingame.
Why wouldn't they?
Titans had 2 fullbacks start one game and used them both. And Torrey Carter, I believe is his name. It might be Troy Carter, but I'm dyslexic, so who knows. But either way, he has been looking really good, and Derrick Henry actually had some of his best games behind Carter, so I don't think Blasingame being out is going to be too big of a hit. I do love the fact that everyone's saying Derrick Henry can't win MVP because he is not a quarterback, and he goes and throws a touchdown, though. So Derrick Henry for MVP. You heard it here first.
So if we spin this back to fantasy, I expect Derrick Henry to have a big game. I do not expect him to throw another touchdown, though. And we're all in on A.J. Brown. I think, would you think about starting Tannehill this week on the Titans side while we're there?
See, Tannehill's a frustrating guy to play because if we get into the red zone, Derrick Henry's the guy that we want to get the touchdown to. It's every single time. Tannehill does have that ability to run it in for a touchdown. He can get those rushing stats. But really, he has not looked as good this year as he has in the previous 2 years. And I think it's honestly just because we're leaning even more on Derrick Henry, which I didn't think was possible. So I think I would still try to shy away from Tannehill if I could.
Yeah, I would shy away from Tannehill. I would even start Carson Wentz in this matchup over Ryan Tannehill. So from the Colts side, I like Carson Wentz. Obviously, you're playing Jonathan Taylor. And I think Michael Pittman is still a solid play. The Titans defense has shown that their one weakness is giving up big plays, and especially in the passing game. So I do like the stack of Carson Wentz and Michael Pittman. Outside of that, though, there's not I feel like the guys that you normally play in this game, you play, and then there's not any like sleepers or extra wide receivers that I'm feeling in this matchup, especially with T.Y. Hilton being questionable.
Guys, just one more quick stat before we move on, just because I wasn't here for the recap episode. The Titans started a corner on the outside against the Kansas City Chiefs, the highest powered offense we've seen in the last decade, who has never played an NFL snap. He has been cut by 4 different practice squads and has never made an NFL roster. We called him up because he knew the playbook and we were out of corners. The corner that was supposed to slot out there was ruled out in pregame, and he played all 72 defensive snaps for the entire game, and we did not allow a touchdown to the Chiefs. I think it's just absolutely insane to me.
Mixture of guy having his breakout game and the Chiefs just being a mess at the same time. I don't know, but yes, that is enough talk for Titans Colts. We can move on to the LA Rams traveling to the Houston Texans. And I think I mentioned earlier we should talk about the Texans running backs. Now that it's a 2-headed attack instead of a 3. There's a lot of people that were going out and getting David Johnson and Phillip Lindsay this week. I'm not convinced that either of them are going to be good because I think the Texans are still going to fall behind way too much. But are you guys opposing that viewpoint?
Kind of, but only in the sense that not this week. I tend to like Phillip Lindsay more once because Tyrod Taylor was activated off the IR. Or he opened his practice window. I don't know the exact language. He's not going to play this week. Davis Mills is going to start. So with Davis Mills, I think all the running backs are out. But we forget how good this Texans team actually looked with Tyrod Taylor playing. So now that there's only 2 running backs instead of 3, you mentioned they'll probably still be down. Phillip Lindsay was a little bit more of the pass catching, big play. I think once Tyrod comes back, I like Philip Lindsay, so maybe he's worth an add a week early. But for this specific week, I'm not playing any of them.
Yeah, quick question here, guys. We talked about the point spread for the Titans game. Just fun fact, the point spread for this game is 16.5 point favorites for the Rams. For any of our fantasy bettors out there, would you touch this line at all? I mean, I know the Texans are bad, don't get me wrong, but 16.5 is a pretty tempting number.
I would take for the Texans. I'd probably take it. I mean, they were in the game with the Cardinals last week until the very end, until they started to pull away. 16.5 points is a lot. Like, I don't know the stats behind me, but I feel like a lot of the times they don't hit. But like, people still bet them because it's such a lopsided matchup. But I think I wouldn't put a lot of money on it, but I'd throw. Well, I'm not a big gambler, and so I like $1 still a lot of money to me. So like $5 maximum, but I think the 16.5 points is tempting with the Texans. They're not like completely inept. I know they're a lot worse with David Mills, but they can still do something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I could not take the Rams minus 16.5, but Texans lose by 2 touchdowns and win me a bet. I could see that happening all day.
And another question for you guys, thinking about the trade deadline coming up, has my mind on trades. I am looking at fantasy trades pretty much 24/7. And I got to think about Cooper Kupp here. So Cooper Kupp is currently the number 1 receiver in fantasy. He has been very consistent, putting up big points, winning people matchups. Do we think that Cooper Kupp can really keep this up all year and we want to hold him on our teams? Or do you want to sell this guy while he is at his absolute peak value and go get a top 2 or 3 running back?
You got to get a running back and a receiver back for the way. Like, I'm for. I don't think his trajectory it's gonna even out. He's gonna come down to earth a little bit. He's clearly still the number 1 guy on a high-powered offense. So we're not like giving him away, like banking on this drop off. But if you could go out there and get a top running back and a startable caliber receiver, a Calvin Ridley, a Stephon Diggs, guys that have been getting targets, been getting air yards, but just haven't put up the fantasy points yet because they're eventually going to come. There's Calvin Ridley. He's had 10 targets in all but one game, or 10 plus targets. Same with Stephon Diggs. He had a little bit of a breakout before their bye against the Titans. And again, well, he's already had his bye. So that's another thing when we talk trades. If you're trading, you get a bonus if you trade for someone that's already had their bye because now you don't have to worry about missing them out. So I'm not saying trade Cooper Kupp is like a must, but if you could go out there, I'm trying to even think off the top of my head, like a Najee Harris and a Stephon Diggs would be tempting. The name just forgot me, a Dalvin Cook and a Calvin Ridley, like something like that might be tempting if someone's willing to do that because Cooper Kupp has been so points heavy in the first half of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you have to get 2 starting pieces for him. I mean, if he drops off, I still see him being like wide receiver between like 7 and 15. So yeah, I mean, there's no point in going out there and just trading him for 1 running back. I mean, maybe Derrick Henry with how his trajectory is, but I'd still want 2 starting caliber pieces for Cooper Kupp. But don't just completely rule out trading him and wanting to keep him. I agree. That's something you should look at and see if there's a way you can improve your team, make it deeper by trading somebody who's a little hotter than you should be.
Yeah, I think we often say, in fantasy, there's truly no player that's untouchable, but don't mistake untouchable for we're willing to give them up. That's just a good mindset. Any player has value to be traded. It's just what are you willing to take in return, or how much is that other team willing to give up? And another guy, like we talk about the Texans, Brandon Cooks, he always could, is like the only startable option at wide receiver. And he's a guy in the actual NFL that might be moved here at the trade deadline. So something to keep out. The same teams I mentioned that might be interested in Desean Jackson might have some interest in Brandon Cooks as well. So that's another name to watch out for the actual NFL trade deadline. But the Rams-wise, Van Jefferson, Robert Woods, fantasy this week. Are you comfortable playing? Are you playing all of them because it is the Texans? Sony Michel maybe because like where are you guys at with the rest of the Rams offense?
I think Michelle's a bit too much of a deep cut for me because of how much they like to feed Darrell Henderson. And even if they get up and Michelle gets carries, not convinced he's going to get enough or get a score to be fantasy relevant. When it comes to Van Jefferson, I could see it. I could definitely see playing him in a pinch. Say you're missing a Marquise Brown this week, and maybe have another injury. And Robert Woods, I'm always more confident on than Van Jefferson. I would definitely throw Robert Woods out there in a good matchup.
And I think that Robert Woods has been building some trust with Stafford over the past couple of weeks. I've really seen him starting to step it up and starting to get utilized more. Even if he doesn't put up the big stat lines, he's still receiving a lot more targets. So I definitely feel comfortable starting Woods. I'm with George, only starting Jefferson if I'm really deep. I definitely want to stash Jefferson if I can anywhere, because if either of these two guys go down, Jefferson is going to step in and be a huge fantasy asset, in my opinion. And if you have a keeper league or a dynasty league, by all means, go get him. He'll be good in the future for sure.
Yes, as someone who has Van Jefferson in one of their dynasty leagues, I like hearing that. Let's move on to a rematch of the wild card round. Pittsburgh Steelers, Cleveland Browns. Baker Mayfield was cleared to play. He is going to play this week. Does that change? I mean, really, Nick Chubb's supposed to be back. Like, I don't think there's the guys that you would play for the Browns, Chubb, Baker. Well, probably not playing Baker, but Chubb, he's a go. The wide receivers, where you at with them? And then this guy from last week, Ernest Johnson. Now that Chubb's back, he had a huge game on Thursday Night Football, but that was 10 days ago from the time they're going to play on Sunday, or 10 days prior to they played on Sunday. What are your thoughts on him?
I'd say if you are short at running back right now, he could potentially see that Kareem Hunt volume that we've seen. For some reason, no matter how good Nick Chubb is, the Browns don't want to just use him as their sole back. As a Titans fan, I find it so funny because Browns fans will argue. And if you see any post talking about Derrick Henry leading the league in rushing, go look at the comments. I guarantee you there is comments from Browns fans going, well, if Nick Chubb had as many carries, if Nick Chubb had, always, it never fails. But Nick Chubb doesn't get that many carries. The Browns don't want to give him that many carries. So Ernest Johnson will be used, in my opinion. Is he going to be used enough that you want to start him? Is he a must start? No. But there's injuries. Maybe you're a Saquon Barkley owner, and he's looking like he's going to be out. Maybe you have one of those Ravens running backs that you probably shouldn't have. Maybe you are desperate for a running back. Ernest Johnson could potentially slot in there and fill a hole this week. Oh, and as far as receivers, no, none of them.
Oh, yeah. I'm on Landry with Baker coming back. Just Landry. I'm not touching Odell Beckham. I'm done with Odell Beckham. You can cut him, get rid of him. I'm done.
But do you trust his health enough that you think Landry can last the whole game?
I mean, now that he had kind of the mini bye after coming back, he was totally cleared. It's not even like he's on the injury report. I'm confident that he can get through the game, but I get your skepticism.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Landry would be the guy I would tend to like, but, I would just not expect a huge game out of him. Like going in thinking, if I get 12 to 14 points out of him, that's a good week for Landry this week, especially against the Steelers defense. Real quick on Ernest Johnson, two guys we talked about earlier that are backup running backs, Samaje Perine. Well, he's not a backup anymore. He's starting this week, but Michael Carter Jr. I feel like I like Ernest Johnson more than both those guys. How about you guys?
Man, see, that's difficult because Perine has that pass catching ability, and Ernest Johnson has that potential Kareem Hunt volume. Michael Carter is probably your safest bet to get volume. Man, that's a good question. I think, I hate to say it, but I'd go Michael Carter out of the three personally.
I'm glad you said it before I did, because I was going to say the same thing, and then I would probably put Ernest Johnson 2, because I think he's a little bit more of a lock to get volume than Perine, because we're kind of banking on either a lot of catches or the Bengals to get up big to see more volume out of Perine.
So to summarize that, please hope that you're not in that boat and you have someone else to pivot from, because we don't really like any of those options.
Yes.
Let's hit the Steelers real quick. Eric Ebron is out. Pat Freiermuth, the rookie out of Penn State, should be starting. I know Steelers fans love him. George is doing some weird thing. Make sure you're checking us out on YouTube.
Darts.
Oh, you're throwing darts. Okay.
He's
Maybe
going
you're
on the
playing
dartboard.
cornhole. I wasn't 100% sure.
Well, depending on what friend you ask of ours, maybe we are playing cornhole.
Yeah, you never. Well, that's an inside joke that'll take too long to explain. But Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, you guys like either of them this week? I feel like Deontay Johnson is pretty safe most weeks, but what about Chase Claypool?
I mean, what are your other options? Because that's the biggest thing. If he is one of your best players remaining because of buys and injuries, then yeah, go ahead, slot him into your, put him in your slot. I mean, there's worst options out there, but if you are pretty solid at wide receiver, if you got guys like, Chris Godwin maybe, or an Adam Thielen even, like I would start them over Claypool. If you're talking mid-tier wide receivers, I'm not sold on him, not because I don't think Claypool is going to be good. If you have a keeper or dynasty league, Claypool is a huge must-go get if you can, while he's cheap. But Big Ben just doesn't have it this year. I've seen some really questionable throws out of him. He really looks like he is 1 year past where he should be playing, and I think until Big Ben is no longer the quarterback, Claypool is not going to have the value he should have.
Very well.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I kind of like playing him this week a little bit, but I think it's Deontay Johnson and big jump down to Claypool for me, like you.
Yeah, Claypool is in my flex in our league of record due to injuries, COVID, and the bye weeks. But he's traditionally like my wide receiver 5. So that's just, if you like Tyler said, if you have to do it, you have to do it. We're at that time of the year. We'll move on to George's favorite team, the Philadelphia Eagles, without Miles Sanders against the Detroit Lions. As an Eagles fan, you got to feel pretty good going up against the winless Lions. I almost said the Giants, and the Giants.
Not really, because when we lose this game, it's going to be even more embarrassing. But I can start us off from a fantasy spin here. We talked big about Kenny Gainwell. I want to let everyone know that there's reports from Eagles practice that Jordan Howard's running with the ones. Jordan Howard's going to get promoted off the practice squad and play. So it's not just that one-headed monster. We're probably going to see a lot of Gainwell, but Jordan Howard's going to jump in and get a lot more of the first and second down snaps, might get some goal line work. Not enough to be fantasy relevant at my point, but enough to maybe make Gainwell a lot less fantasy relevant. If I'm going to start a back, it's going to be him, though. Other than that, I think you got to start Devontae Smith in this matchup. You got to start Jalen Hurts like we always do, and Dallas Goedert as well.
Look, if you're in a position where you have to start an Eagles running back to have a chance to win this week, you lost. I'm sorry. It was a good week. Good try. Try again next week. The Eagles don't run the ball. And when they do, they injure their top running back. And then they run, get 7 yards on the first carry. They're like, wow, that was good. We should go shotgun and throw it. It makes no sense. This coaching staff is absolutely just stupid. I don't know what they're doing. Their decision-making and play calls are just out there. That there's a one penalty that it was 4th down and they accepted the penalty anyway, made it 3rd down, and then picked up the first. It's just the coaching is so questionable right now. I don't trust anybody on the Eagles. Jalen Hurts, sure, you could slot him in as your quarterback. I don't even want to start Devontae Smith because the Eagles offense is so predictable. They're going to go shotgun. They're going to pass it. I don't want to start any of them, even against the Lions.
Yeah, I'm more with you. Like, you're going to start Jalen Hurts, but I'm going to say it every week. This dude gets all his points on the ground, not passing it. 1 week he's not going to find the end zone. He's not going to rush for 70 yards. Like, eventually that's going to get caught up. I mean, you have to play him out there. He's like scored 20 points every week this season because he's so heavily used on the ground game. But eventually it'll happen. I don't think it'll be this week against the Lions, but we'll move over to the Lions. I'll let Tyler talk about Jared Goff. But the big thing out of the injury report is both Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift are questionable. I feel like that is like they've been questionable for every game this season. And one of them still plays. They both still play. They both are big parts of the offense. If they play, I like both of them this week, especially DeAndre Swift and then TJ Hawkinson, but I'm not touching any of the wide receivers for Detroit.
Look, I know that Jared Goff has 8 touchdowns and 6 picks, which doesn't look that great, but this dude is playing on a winless Lions team. He has absolutely no receivers, no running backs with all the injuries. He is playing on one of the worst NFL teams I have ever seen, and he's still holding his own, and this dude is even fantasy relevant some weeks. if you have to start him or you have to start Sam Darnold because you have to pick somebody up, right now I'm leaning Goff because Sam Darnold is so unpredictable and terrible. If you have to start him or, man, I don't know, even
Teddy
Derek Carr,
Bridgewater?
some weeks he puts up 25, some weeks he puts up 2. I'm not trusting that either. Teddy Bridgewater, yeah, I might still go Goff, especially against the Eagles. They suck. So go for it. Start Jared Goff if you need a quarterback that badly. But no, all honesty, I think this is actually going to be a close game. As far as Lions that you're going to start, I think there's really not many. TJ Hawkinson is pretty much the only Lion that is, if he plays, TJ Hawkinson's the only line that's really worth playing on a weekly basis, other than DeAndre Swift, but he's always questionable every single week as well. So try to avoid the Lions and the Eagles if you can.
Yeah, let's.
You guys didn't even give me Dallas Goedert.
Okay, first of all, we're talking about the Lions. He plays for the Eagles.
I mean, you're saying avoid everybody. I know. No, I'm saying Swift and Hawkinson with you guys.
Gotcha. But I will say, Snyder, I have missed you on the podcast. Your hot take: start Jared Goff over Derek Carr, which this week makes sense because he's on bye. But that one still blew my mind. But we'll move on.
Derek Carr is just. He looks like Sid from Toy Story. You can't trust a kid that evil. Anybody who would break toys like that is just not worth trusting. You got to go with Jared Goff. The guy just looks nice. He looks like a nice guy, not like stupid Sid over there. It's a hot take, but it's a good take.
All right, but let's move on to a matchup that contains another pair of 2 struggling quarterbacks. The San Francisco 49ers are at the Chicago Bears. Take this. I don't even know where to begin with this game, so someone else needs to take this one.
Why don't we start with the 49ers running backs? Because I hate them. Eli Mitchell kind of dominated the carries last week. He's probably the lead guy. We had JaMychal Hasty starting to get work back in. He was a coaching staff favorite. Do you have any worry about Eli Mitchell with Hasty working back up from the injury?
I mean,
I would.
I like him. I'm starting him in our league of record. What, is this a hot take too? I mean,
no,
the 49ers
really.
running backs they're not trustable, but Eli Mitchell is honestly, he's pretty good. Like the way they looked last week, they played against the Colts, and the Colts have one of the best run defenses. And yes, he ended up slowing down by the end of the game, and he was battling an injury. But in the beginning of the game, they were heavily utilizing him, and he looked pretty good. So I like Eli Mitchell. I'm slotting him in there. I do think he's a trade high candidate because they're going to have other running backs coming off the IR. Trade him while he does have value.
Still.
Yep, Jeff Wilson. I have him stashed there. Yeah, I like Eli Mitchell this week.
Okay. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I like Eli Mitchell over JaMychal Hasty, but it's Kyle Shanahan, so with the running backs, you can never feel 100% confidence in picking one of them. Wide receiver-wise, you're starting Debo, and that's pretty much it. And I don't even like Ross Dwelly with George Kittle still out on the IR. So let's pivot to the Chicago Bears, and we're going to talk about their running backs. I know Khalil Herbert has been the hot name. He's had 18 carries in the last 3 games. My question is there any concern with Damien Williams coming back? I know he was back last week, but he didn't clear the COVID protocols till Saturday. Do you have any concerns that now that he's been cleared for a week that he'll be more involved in the game plan and could limit it? Or do you think Herbert has just looked so good that they're going to roll with the hot hand?
So I think people tend to forget that first week that Herbert got 18 carries, Damien Williams was super effective and was, even though he was the lead guy, Herbert still had his piece of the offense. And this Bears offense is struggling so bad with quarterbacks, like you said, and they're not throwing the ball that much that they're getting all their points on the ground. And there's enough carries and points on the ground to go around to probably still support Herbert, even if Williams is going to get more carries than he did last week. So I'm not worried. I think Herbert's actually the lead guy. And I don't think I'm confident enough to go out there and start Williams also, but he's going to be better than last week. You're right.
All
Herbert's
right.
fine.
And then wide receiver.
Not my top start. Allen Robinson, stash him. Don't start him. He is a hot trade candidate for the trade deadline coming up. I'm not starting him. Justin Fields, I love the guy. He's my favorite rookie quarterback. Don't start him either. only person on the Bears.
One day
worth
we're going to
starting.
see Brandon Ayuk and Allen Robinson be good again, and we're going to be like, okay, all's right in the fantasy world. But
That's what
now,
I said about OJ Howard 2 years ago. And look where we are now.
fair.
Yeah.
And David and Joe.
I don't think those two getting back to normalcy or being productive isn't going to make everything right in the fantasy world. There's so much unpredictability. But that was, a matchup that you probably won't see a lot on Red Zone. Let's just call it like it is. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons. Tyler already said he's not starting Sam Darnold because he has looked a little rough after the team started 3-0. Granted, his wide receivers won't make a catch for him. It is super frustrating to watch that team. They are dropping balls left and right. Matt Rule did say he is the starter. David Tepper did come out, their owner, and said that they're out of the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, at least for the rest of this season. So I know we're not starting Sam Darnold. I'm with you on that. But you still trust DJ Moore. I feel like Robbie Anderson is definitely out. But what are your guys' thoughts?
What a roller coaster ride this season is of DJ Moore. He starts off as a top 5 wide receiver. Now he gets the drops and their offense starts to struggle, and he is struggling, but I think he's good enough that in a matchup against Atlanta, you have to play him and hope this is the turnaround game. I don't see any better options out there on most teams than DJ Moore, but I'm definitely out on Robbie Anderson, like you said.
Yeah, I like DJ Moore. I'm starting him. I have him in my starting lineup, and I'm comfortable with it because I still think he can put up big points. With that being said, I'm also currently trying to trade for other receivers because I'm not as comfortable as I am admitting. I'm back and forth. I love DJ, and I want to keep him in my starting lineup. At the same time, I want to have a backup option because I'm a little unsure long term. I think DJ is going to figure it out. I think he's just got a bad case of the drops right now. We've seen it with Vontae Adams. We've seen it with A.J. Brown. We've seen guys have the drops and end up fixing it. Nelson Aguilar couldn't have caught a cold with the Eagles, and he actually looked good with other teams. So once he gets the bad case of the drops out of there, I think that he'll start to look a little bit better. I mean, the Panthers are also playing a really bad defense in the Falcons, so this might be the game
for sure.
to figure it out. This could be the game that DJ gets 25 plus, and boom, he's right back to being a top fantasy receiver again. Who knows? We will see.
Yeah, it could be.
Moving over to the.
I was going to say, it could be the game that Robbie Anderson breaks out, but definitely not going to risk him in my starting lineup. You're a lot more braver if you do. But since I cut George off, we'll pivot to the Atlanta Falcons. Oh, and you can start Chuba Hubbard. That's a great start this week.
Oh, but yeah, that.
The Atlanta Falcons, Kyle Pitts seems to be like a solid.
Is he the top option now in that offense?
I think Ridley is still out targeting him, but Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley just haven't been on the same page. Like, I believe it was 10 targets to 4 catches last week to 6 catches and 8 targets for Kyle Pitts. So, like, he's still up there in targets, but he's doing more with those. So, if you're looking at receptions, it's Kyle Pitts. If you're looking at targets, it's Calvin Ridley. But for a rookie tight end, that's still pretty impressive.
Yeah, like Kyle Pitts has now moved into must-start tight end territory, and he already had his bye too, so you can be confident if you have him. And I'm personally, as a Calvin Ridley owner, worried until you look at the fact that he is getting 10-plus targets a game. Him and Ryan have to figure it out, and having Pitts doing better these last few weeks is only going to help Calvin Ridley down the road, because you got to think there's going to be times where they're going to double Pitts, leave Calvin Ridley single coverage, and we know he can beat that because he did it for years with Julio on the other side. So don't freak out if you're a Calvin Ridley owner, and definitely I would start him this week.
Look, in our league of record, I was freaking out after the first 2 weeks because my tight ends were slacking. I have Dalton Schultz and I have Kyle Pitts, and I was like, oh my God, my tight ends suck. Now I'm sitting here like, man, which one do I want to start? They're both so good. What a turnaround they have made, and it's so nice to have some fantasy-relevant tight ends here.
100%. Still waiting for the Tommy Tremble breakout game. But let's move to our last 1 o'clock game. The Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. I want to talk about the Buffalo Bills, and Snyder, I want you to look up the line on this one because I feel like it has to be close to 16.5 as well. See if it's a bigger line. Dawson Knox, their tight end, who had come on strong, is still out dealing with his broken hand. So the big question for Buffalo is, do you start the tight end that's going to replace him? Probably not. There's so many other options. You're going to start Stephon Diggs, Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley. They're probably all viable options. The bigger question for Buffalo is always Devin Singletary or Zach Moss. And George, I'll let you answer this one because I know you have a big
The
crush
answer
on
is
both
always
of them.
Zach Moss. Why are you even? I was a big Singletary fan at the beginning, but I'm Team Zach Moss now. So no, I mean my answer is him. I just don't think Singletary has the playmaking ability that Zach Moss does. So with the same amount of carries, which they're getting every week, I'd rather play Moss. And going back to the tight end thing, you're not starting the backup tight end in my opinion. But that just means more targets to make Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley both relevant at the same time most weeks, so it just deepens our wide receiver pool in my opinion.
Yeah, Cody, to answer your question, just backtrack a little bit here. The Dolphins do have the second highest point spread. Third would be the Bengals with an 11-point favorite over the Jets. Second is the Bills with a 14-point favorite over the Dolphins. And then, of course, you have the Rams as 16.5-point favorites. Let's just go ahead and parlay all three of those. They're all going to hit.
That's too rich for my blood.
Hold on.
Not even for $1.
Hey, dollars are very precious. But let's talk about the Dolphins real quick. Tua, he's looked pretty decent. I know there's been a lot of trade speculation. I know he came out and said it doesn't feel like he's wanted. Brian Flores has said he is the starter the rest of the season, barring an injury, which makes you seem like they are out on the Deshaun Watson trade as well. So it looks like Watson will be staying put until the offseason, until more clarity comes with his legal cases. But back to fantasy football-wise, Myles Gaskin. He's a guy that's been super up and down. He started to get involved 3 weeks ago, had a little bit of a down game, was back last week. What are your guys' thoughts on a Myles Gaskin?
I don't like the matchup.
I'm hopping off the Gaskin train, man. I've been trying to ride that Gaskin bandwagon from preseason, and I tried to stay strong on it through most of the season, but you know what? It's hit one too many bumps, and I flew off that bandwagon. It's tough. I don't like trusting Myles Gaskin at this point. They have other backs that I feel like are not anywhere close to as good. Salvan Ahmed, I don't think he's anywhere close to Gaskin's level, but yet they still want to use all these other guys. So to me, Gaskin's not trustable right now. That whole offense is not trustable. And in this matchup, the Bills have a really tough defense, and the Bills have a really good offense. The Bills are most likely going to go up big and go up big early, and the Dolphins are going to have to abandon the run game and just air it out. So I would avoid Gaskin. On the Dolphins side, though, if you are really, really struggling at receiver, and I mean really struggling at receiver, one guy that you could stash because he is coming back soon would be Will Fuller. I know that the Dolphins offense is not trustable, but teams like to have that speedy guy that they can just air it out to, and Will Fuller is that guy. He is coming back soon, so a potential stash for you.
I like it. Devonte Parker is hopefully going to play this week. He is currently listed as questionable, but it seems like he'll make it back. They did put Malcolm Brown on IR earlier this week, so that could be an uptick for Myles Gaskins in future weeks. But like Tyler mentioned, this matchup is just too good. So let's move to the 4 o'clock games. I think we hit all the key storylines at the 1 o'clocks. The first one is the New England Patriots at the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers are coming off of a bye, and the big news is Austin Eckler is questionable after not practicing on Thursday or Friday, and he was downgraded from limited to did not practice from Wednesday to Thursday. So it doesn't look great for him. But if he doesn't go, I feel like you'd want to pick up a running back in that offense. But which one is it? Josh Kelly, Roundtree, Justin Jackson, or are you just out on any of the running backs?
The fact that there's so many concerns me. And I feel like we've always been trying to say, like, I think we went through this last year. It's Josh Kelly's time to shine. And then obviously, I like how he turned off his camera. But
yeah, I hit the wrong button. I'm sorry. I tried to sneeze with my mic and I turned off the camera. Go to
we're
YouTube.
Off the rails here.
Yep, off the rails.
This is why we're couch GMs, not real GMs right here, guys. These are the moments.
We can't even general manage our microphones.
This is bad.
But we can general manage our fantasy teams.
Yes, we can. And
Poorly.
okay, back to the Chargers running backs. I feel like we were all in on Josh Kelly last year when we had the Eckler injury, and then all of a sudden it was no Justin Jackson, and then Justin Jackson gets hurt, and we're all in on Josh Kelly, and everyone else got carries.
Then it was Kalen Ballage off the practice squad.
Yeah. And now we have Roundtree here too. But I think the coaching staff, even though he is probably the least sexy name out of the group, loves Justin Jackson. So the first person I think that would get carries if Eckler's out is Justin Jackson. And he's all right. He had a couple of decent fantasy games last year. You might want to play him and maybe he'll get you 10, but don't love it. I would look elsewhere unless you're desperate.
Man, our fantasy season is getting pretty bad that we're talking about these guys, isn't it? There's so many guys that were like, I don't know, we got Justin Jackson, but we could have Michael Carter or Samaje Perine instead. Like,
we can add him in the group. This is even better.
What is happening to our fantasy season here, guys? We're just falling apart. This is terrible.
Yeah, and there's not even a lot of buys this week.
Barely.
Yeah, no. I mean, we're missing one running back, Josh Jacobs. Like, it's not even like there's 6 teams on bye like last week. Yeah.
Yeah, it's rough. Yeah, I don't love any of the running backs. I mean, if you need a super cheap option in DFS, maybe go with Justin Jackson, but I wouldn't play them in any like redraft fantasy option for me. So, I do like Justin Herbert. Obviously, I like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams with no Austin Eckler. I think we'll see an uptick in targets and catches for them. So we can move over to the Patriots side, and we got to talk about their running back situation as well. There's Damian Harris. There's the pass catcher now that's Brandon Bolden, which till a couple weeks ago, I didn't even realize he was still in the NFL. He's like the Udonis Haslam of the NFL to me. He's just always been on the Patriots, and he's always been there. Those guys, like, what are your thoughts on, like, Harris, I feel like is a definite start at this point. Mm-hmm. But what about, like, Brandon Bolden, especially in half point and full point PPR?
Yeah, I think it's all game script at this point. I think Harris is a must start if they're not in a really tough matchup that they might have to abandon the run early. But in all honesty, who do the Patriots have to throw to? They got Jacoby Myers, who has over 1,000 career receiving yards, but has never caught a touchdown. So he's not going to be catching the touchdowns. He's not the guy. They do have Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith.
Revenge game.
Healthy, when they feel like being productive, they're wishy-washy as well. So I feel like Brandon Bolden might actually be useful in the passing game. And he might be worth stashing on your bench, but I think that's as far as it goes. Stash him on your bench. I know I just hyped him up a lot and told you not to play him, but honestly, the Patriots don't really have much else to throw to, so I think Bolden is worth a stash. And if he does continue what he's been doing this past week, then I think he might be worth a play in the coming weeks, just not now.
Definitely the Patriots pass catcher I'm most confident playing this week is Hunter Henry, because he's been 10 points a week. For tight ends, that's something, but I'm not touching any other wide receivers. I don't love Brandon Bolden. I don't think as much as you do. I'm starting Damian Harris, and that's it. The Patriots are still a wasteland to me, and I don't really want to touch them except for the tight end position because it's just so desperate. You got to get it where you can get it.
Yeah, I just will say I agree with you on Hunter Henry, but since week 4, he's had a touchdown in every game. So eventually that's not going to happen. He's not going to catch a touchdown.
But it's a revenge game, so he's got to get a touchdown. Isn't that how that works?
In theory, but it's the Patriots, so like he might play quarterback or something. You never know with this team. So we should probably move on before we get carried away with some weird offensive formations that they're going to run out with, and talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Seattle Seahawks. No Russell Wilson. So that means Tyler Lockett is – I heard somebody on another fantasy podcast or fantasy radio – said you got to treat Tyler Lockett like he's the guy that's actually injured, not Russell Wilson. So you can't cut him until Russell Wilson is healthy, but he's riding your bench. DK Metcalf isn't a great start, but he is the guy that Geno Smith seems to be going to. Alex Collins is pretty much the only guy that you feel comfortable playing in this match, or for me on the Seattle Seahawks, because he gets the carries, he gets the rushing attempts. But man, this Seattle Seahawks offense that used to have like 5 quality fantasy starters is down to Alex Collins.
If you're a fan of fantasy football, this game sucks. Honestly, you got James Robinson, you got Alex Collins maybe.
I thought you were going to stop. I'm not going to lie.
And you got DK Metcalf, and that is the whole game right there. Those 3 players, that's it. Like, I'm not even starting a kicker in this matchup. I don't even know if I trust defenses because both teams are so gloriously bad that I don't know what's going to happen. But those 3 guys are the only 3 guys I'm starting. I'm not touching anybody else for fantasy with this. This is almost as bad as
We're
the
gonna
Eagles
find a
and Lions.
way for this. Wow, we're gonna find a way for this game to end 6-3, and both defenses are still gonna score -4, and we're not gonna know how it happened.
No, my
That
luck,
would
this
be-
game is going to end up turning out like 48-43, and everybody's going to break records for fantasy, and then they're going to play back this clip where I'm like, everybody sucks, don't start them. I'm going to look like an idiot. That's what's going to happen now.
Well, hopefully
start
not,
those.
because that would definitely hurt our credibility. But I don't think you have too much to worry about. But let's move on to the next game, which isn't much more exciting. It's the Washington football team at the Denver Broncos. The Washington football team, you have Terry McLaurin. I know
That's it.
Antonio Gibson, he's been banged up. Like, I feel like you drafted him so high, it's very hard to bench him. Like, do you really have 2 or 3 running backs better than him? That'll be tough. But, if you got James Robinson late because you drafted before Travis Etienne got hurt, if you able to pick up Chuba Hubbard or Khalil Herbert, like, I'm starting to think, like, Gibson's no longer a must start is, I guess, the best way to say that. The only guy I'm starting as a weekly starter on this team is Terry McLaurin, and then the sleeper is the tight end Ricky Seals-Jones until Logan Thomas comes back. But again, that's just another tight end that's just like a random dart throw up at the dartboard.
And on the Broncos side of the ball, Melvin Gordon is not trustworthy. Javonte Williams is not trustworthy. Both of them could get points. Do you trust them? Not really. And as far as the receivers, all of them have the potential to get 10. None of them have the potential to get 20. That's just how I feel about them. And honestly, you try to prove me wrong. Like, name one receiver that is most likely going to get 20 or not able to get 10. It's just, they're all...
Jerry Jeudy's back. I think he's the most likely option.
Oh, another guy to get 10. Woo.
I mean, and we say this, and like, there's actually, like, Cortland Sutton's actually top 10 in receiving yards in the NFL, and it's just, he's not scoring touchdowns, and it's not turning into enough fantasy points for us to, like, view him as an every week start or someone that you can really trust. But, like, he's had a couple of boom weeks and then a couple of weeks down at, like, 2 points, and it's kind of got us all pumping the brakes on him, but he's really not been as bad as we make it sound.
Yeah, you hit it right on the nail on the head. He has 3 weeks of 15 points or more and 3 weeks under 5 points. So, yeah, big boomer bust. It is super impressive on how even they have got Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. It's like 8 carries and 8 carries, 5 targets and 5 targets. It is honestly impressive on how balanced and how 50-50 that backfield is. Not great for fantasy, but it is kind of cool to see in the NFL how it's playing out and how consistently they've done that halfway through the season already. Our last 4 o'clock matchup, though, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. A little Jameis Winston revenge game. I don't know how you feel about that because it doesn't feel great, honestly. Alvin Kamara, he's in your lineups. We talked about Mark Ingram at the top of the show. Not really a fantasy guy. It's probably worth an ad, but you're not playing him. He might still, unless you're in a super pinch, like you might like him more than Samaje Perine, but like that's where you're putting him in that category. But is there any wide receiver? I know they got Traquan Smith and they tried to feed him the ball. They were just a little off last week. Marquez Callaway hasn't been terrible the last few weeks. But really, is there any wide receiver on the Saints that you're willing to play?
No.
Okay, that was short and sweet, and I liked it. No. Let's move over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where there's 2 wide receivers you're definitely going to play, and that's Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, especially with Antonio Brown out. Leonard Fournette looks like a steal of the draft. He is in the top. I know I talked about it last week, though. He only got 5 more attempts than Ronald Jones last week, whether that was the blowout game or just because Bruce Arians seems to really like Ronald Jones and will never let him go. You might have to be careful of that. But for now, playoff Lenny is becoming regular season Lenny and winning some people some fantasy matchups, especially if their running backs weren't great to start the draft. The big question, though, is how do you feel about Rob Gronkowski coming back from his rib injury if he does play? He was dominant when he was out there, but are you worried at all about putting him right back in your lineup?
No, if it's like a hamstring injury or one of those soft tissue injuries, then yes, because those injuries, like I said earlier, do have the issues of lingering. They do have the potential of re-injuring. With fractured ribs, I feel like once it's healed, it's healed. It's mostly going to be a pain management thing. And if there's anybody tough enough to deal with pain management, it's going to be Gronk. So if he's back in there, he's going to be one of Brady's top targets. So I have no issues slotting him right back in there. Especially
Definitely, and I kind of like that. Yes. But I kind of like that Antonio Brown's out the week that Gronk's coming back, because we have the wide receiver trio that turns into a duo, but then we have the third guy coming back in. When it's 4, it's a lot, and there's always somebody that's going to bust. When there's 3, Brady can normally make 3 solid pass-catching fantasy options in a week, so I like all 3.
Yeah, and one more thing is, don't hear what I'm not saying. You're still playing Mike Evans, but Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore do have a history of some pretty intense matchups, and Lattimore has won a lot of those, shutting him down a decent amount. So maybe going with expectations that this might not be your 3-touchdown week from Mike Evans like we saw against the Bears. Like, he might be closer to his week 1 performance, which isn't great for fantasy, but he's still a top wide receiver. You still got to roll him out there. Let's move on to Sunday Night Football. And we'll come back to the Cowboys because there's some big news about Dak Prescott possibly not playing. So we'll get the Vikings out of the way. There's no surprises, right? It's Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen. Like, that's right. Is there any surprises? Any guys I'm missing?
If you're super desperate for tight end, Tyler Conklin is a potential option. That's only if you're super desperate. Otherwise, no, not really. That's it.
No, that covers it for me too.
All right, so Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott is officially questionable. He did practice a little bit this week, but then after practice, he said he was sore, and the team made sure that they were preparing to have Cooper Rush play. I know all Dallas fans are hoping that Dak will play. For fantasy-wise, it makes it very difficult. You might have to go stream a quarterback because you don't want to wait to have to play a guy, unless you can get a Kirk Cousins or even a Daniel Jones, if they're both on your waivers, then maybe you can risk it. But you don't want to be stuck having to, add Cooper Rush to play for Dak Prescott. So think about that going into the weekend, because he will be a true game time decision. Michael Gallup could be back this week. If Michael Gallup's back, let's actually do it this way. If Dak plays, you're comfortable with all 3 wide receivers and Dalton Schultz?
Not all 3. I don't think he's going to have 4 solid targets. I think that you're still solid with Amari Cooper. He's still going to be the number 1. I think you're solid with Dalton Schultz. He seems to be that third down or red zone target. He's going to get his volume, especially with how tight ends are this year. If you have Dalton Schultz, you most likely don't have a better option. But after that, CeeDee Lamb seems to be that big play or nothing guy. Gallup can be the same way. I think if you have to start one of them, you're going CeeDee Lamb. I think with Gallup back, I'm still not starting him. I would bench him. I would stash him if you can, if you have the space for it, but I'm not throwing Gallup into my lineup just yet.
I'm with you there too, because I think we just talked about the whole 3 versus 4 passing target thing, and 3 is a solid number that a good quarterback can hold. And with the first week back, Gallup is the most likely guy to have the bust, because he could end up getting eased back in and splitting some reps with Cedric Wilson still. And if that's the case, there's no way. But yeah, the other 3 I'm definitely confident in. And I just hope that the odd man out some weeks is not Dalton Schultz, because we need the tight end so much. But I have a feeling that the 3 wide receivers could have some big weeks at some point, and Dalton Schultz ends up getting tucked in the back.
Yeah,
look, I'm going to use the Titans as my example just because that's the team I know. But if the Titans get into the red zone, it's going to be either Derrick Henry getting the touchdown or A.J. Brown getting the touchdown. There could be an outlier, but most likely it's going to be one of those 2. With the Cowboys, it could be Michael Gallup. It could be CeeDee Lamb. It could be Dalton Schultz. It could be Amari Cooper. It could be Zeke. It could be Pollard. I think with the Cowboys, you have to temper your expectations in general on a weekly basis, because even though you do have those guys that usually put up those big points, there's so many mouths to feed in that offense that you're going to have your busts. And I think that you got to you got to know that split is going to come. You're going to have your weeks where Gallup is going to put up like 25 points, but Cooper's only going to put up 5. The way that there's no way that they're going to make 6 different players all big fantasy relevant on a weekly basis. So you really have to tamper your expectations. And real quick, Cody, I'll let you go. But if Dak doesn't play, I'm not saying bench Zeke, but tamper your expectations on Zeke as well. He did not perform anywhere close to as good last year when Dak was out as compared to when he was in. So just be careful if you have Zeke. Hope that Dak plays.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great point. That segue into what my next question was. I do agree with you guys on, I think CeeDee Lamb is the top receiving option. Then it's Amari Cooper, and then Dalton Schultz as the tight end. So Michael Gallup is a little bit questionable, but they are a high-powered offense. So I think even though he is first week back, you'd love to wait and see. But if you're struggling for a flex option, just because he has so much high-end potential, like he could come out with a big game because of their offense, he might be worth a flex play. But again, temper expectations. Now let's pivot to what nobody wants, and that is Dak Prescott doesn't play. You already mentioned Zeke would most likely take a big hit, but I still think he'll probably be one of the safest plays with Cooper Rush. Like, I just think they'll get the volume. There won't be as exciting. But wide receiver wise, like honestly, like if Cooper Rush plays, like I like CeeDee Lamb. Like that's pretty much it. And maybe you'll like I like one wide receiver. Like I don't really like Dalton Schultz at that point. I don't really like the other wide receiver, so that's why I pick CeeDee Lamb. If you want to pick Amari Cooper, I understand it, but I just don't see them.
That's where I would go. Yeah.
See, I'm going to go.
It's just not that high-powered offense.
I think we have 3 different options here. I would go Dalton Schultz because I'm a huge believer on backup quarterbacks and rookie quarterbacks like to have that safety net, and usually that safety net is a tight end and not the receiver. They like that big body safe guy for the short check down routes as compared to the guys that can run the deep routes on the outside. We have seen it in the past where that has backfired, but a lot of times when you see a backup or rookie quarterback step in and they are still fresh, a little nervous, they like to have that safety net guy. I think Dalton Schultz becomes the best receiver at that point.
It's possible, and that's like part of that reasoning is why I was thinking Amari Cooper, because he's more the hands guy as opposed to CeeDee Lamb's the big play threat. Is Cooper Rush going to take shots and go to that number one receiver that is the big play threat when he can go to the guy who's closer to the line of scrimmage, has the reliable, catch radius? That's why I think it would have been Amari Cooper. But you could be right with Dalton Schultz for the exact same reason. We don't want to have this situation happen because we don't know.
Yeah, and then I went with CeeDee Lamb just because that seems to be the guy that they're scheming open, and I think they're the guy they trust the most, and that's what they're going to try to scheme open for the quarterback if that can't go. If you're a Cowboys fan, just remember this is a primetime game with Kirk Cousins, so even if Dak doesn't play, you probably still have a chance. But
should we be fading Jefferson and Thielen at all?
I mean, probably not, because like they're still quality players, but just you might not want to stream Kirk Cousins. Even though he's been pretty solid this year, but that's probably enough Cowboys talk. It's actually making my stomach hurt a little bit. So we'll move on to the Monday night game, our last game of the week, the New York Giants at the Kansas City Chiefs, a game that I would have told you at the beginning of the season, unwatchable. And I'm not even 100% sure who to pick in this game now that we're in week 8. The Chiefs defense is that bad. Granted, this is the only one we don't have full injury reports on because they'll come out tomorrow or the day that this podcast is posted because they're the Monday night game. But Kadarius Toney did practice. Evan Ingram did practice. Like, they're looking to get some playmakers back, but again, it's so hard.
Sterling Shepard practiced, not Kadarius Toney.
I'm pretty sure I saw that he came back limited, or he did something off to the side.
Okay. I mean, Sterling Shepard did actually definitely limited practice. I think he was the guy that was closest to playing last week as well. So he's the guy I'm most confident in actually playing this week. But this is going to be a really interesting game if we have more than one healthy wide receiver for the Giants. Because last week it was just Darius Slayton, and Darius Slayton's not anything special. If it was just Kenny Golladay, that'd be cool. If it was just Sterling Shepard, that'd be cool. But
guys,
when it was just Darius Slayton, it was nothing.
Sorry to interrupt, but the Giants injury report included did not practice Saquon Barkley, Kenny Golladay, limited in practice Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, Kadarius Toney. So they both were limited. They both came back to practice. I think on the Chiefs side, we can pretty much just forget about them. Mahomes is going to play. I think he's fine. So you start Mahomes, you start Kelsey, you start Hill. Even with them struggling right now, you still start all three of them. There's really nobody else worth starting on that team. I wouldn't start any running back they're starting.
Think about Darrell Williams.
I'm not starting Darrell Williams either. I'm not touching that.
Okay.
On the Giants side, who would you trust in this game? I mean, I know we were just discussing the receivers, but do you trust Devonte Parker at all with how bad the Chiefs' run defense has been this year? Do you trust Kadarius Toney? Sterling Shepard has seemed to be the go-to guy so far on this offense. If he does play, are you starting him?
Almost like what I was saying. If one of them plays and it's just one of them, I love that guy. If it's two, that's tough because I don't know how the targets are going to split out, if anyone's going to be limited, obviously. But if it's just one, I know that guy is going to be the main guy. So if it's just Toney or just Shepard, I'm in on whoever that is. If it's both, I would probably have to lean Toney because he seems to be the big play guy. He was the guy that they were focusing on getting into the game more recently than Sterling Shepard. But I don't love it that much.
Yeah, I also don't think it helps that this game's on Monday night, and you have to wait all the way till then to see which guys are going to play, which guys aren't going to play. Like, I'm probably as bad as the Chiefs' defense is, it's going to be very hard to say Sterling Shepard is in, unless for some reason, like when the official injury report comes out on Saturday afternoon or Sunday, whenever it officially comes out, and one of them are pulled off. But if they're both listed as questionable, like, I feel like you have to pivot. Like, you can't wait until Sunday, or you're going to be stuck throwing Mecole Hardman or Demarcus Robinson.
Darius Slayton.
Darius Slayton too, but like, yeah. I'm saying there are not a lot of great options out there for the Giants. So it's a good matchup. Like, I feel like you want to get some playmakers against the Chiefs defense because how bad they've been, but it's tough with so many questionable players heading into a Monday night matchup.
I mean, as always, when you're just struggling on who to start, it is going to come down to who else you have. It's kind of hard to be like, start Shepard or don't start Shepard, or, even if you are a guy who has Darrell Williams, I could easily say don't start Darrell Williams, and you could easily say start Darrell Williams, but it depends on who you have. So I think the best way to wrap this up is just by saying, if you are struggling on who to decide for your lineup, let us know who you have, and we will give you some more in-depth analysis based off of your team and let you know who we think is the best out of the options that you have. More personalized to you. Don't be afraid to reach out to us. We will answer, and we will answer fast.
That is right, and normally it's a team effort, except when I don't text back because I'm the worst texter in the world. That's why George and Tyler are on top of our social messages. But that wraps up the Week 8 preview. As always, thanks again for listening to another episode of the Couch. Well, I don't even know the old name of our
PMs podcast.
It's been a long week. I know it's been a long week for you guys, but like I said, thank you again for listening to the Couch GMs podcast.
And guys, I just want to say it's really great to be back doing the podcast again. I miss you guys. I miss doing this every week. To the fans out there listening, I did tear my ACL. I am getting surgery on next Thursday. So next Thursday, I probably won't be doing the podcast after surgery. But after that,
that'd be entertaining as hell.
I'm off work for a month, guys. I can't do anything. I'm on IR. I'm expected to be ready for training camp, but that means I will be available for the podcast for the next month. So I'm excited to be back with you guys. The reason I can't do this on a normal basis is because I work on the days we record. If you guys want more of me out there, find us a sponsor. Start bringing us some money, and I can quit my day job and stay here and talk to you guys. So just reach on out to us. But look, all jokes aside, this podcast is so much more fun for us and way more fun for you when you get involved. So don't be afraid to reach it. Don't be afraid to reach out. Get involved, guys.
Let's see if I can be the only host to not mess up a line in the outro. Well, I already messed it up. We're good.
It's not just me.
Karma.
As much as it was nice hearing Cody keep Tyler's spirit alive while he was gone, it was nice to have you back here, Tyler. And thank you all again for listening to the Couch GMs podcast. For Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth, and we'll see you all next week to talk about Week 9 waivers.
Boom.